Should Christians use cuss words? Should Christians drink alcohol? Should Christians wait to have sex before marriage? I surveyed 885 of my viewers to find out what you guys think about this question, and this video is going to be talking about those results and responding to your guys' comments. Should Christians cuss? 91% of viewers voted that Christians should not cuss, which actually surprised me. I was expecting something closer to, 20-80, because a lot of Christians do cuss a lot. And this is a broader comment that I have that could go in 1,000 different directions. But a thought I've had recently is that Mormons are sometimes better at being Mormon than Christians are about being Christian. And I know I said that in a way that might offend some Mormons. I don't mean to. The point is more actually to compliment my Mormon friends. It's that the Mormons teach certain things and you can easily spot them. It's like they are always really nice and they don't contradict it. I mean, of course, there's obviously always outliers. If you ever watch Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, those chicks are nuts. But most Mormons I meet are very true to their beliefs and they live it out. And so Christians, I feel like a lot of times are just coming up short there. Like Mormon YouTubers, they never cuss and they live out their faith. And Christians, we have our teachings, but then we live in the world and we partake in it. And that goes with the other ideas in this video. Christians are cussing a lot. Christians are having sex before marriage a lot. Christians are drinking a lot. And so it's hard to tell them apart. Christians are a lot of times just blending in with society. And Mormons do a better job because, they abstain from alcohol. And maybe we can dispute over whether or not that's a good thing, but it makes them stand out. And they avoid a lot of the dangers of alcohol. And they don't cuss. Should? No. Can? Debatable. This comment is interesting to me because if God says something, it's either you should or you shouldn't. And when God speaks in the Bible, it's do this, don't do that. God never says with ambiguity. He doesn't speak with ambiguity like, I don't know, I gave you this thing. You can drink it, but you don't have to. No, God says yes or no. And so I don't think this comment is worded properly because God wouldn't make something debatable. He would only ever make things clear. And we muddy things up, and that's why I agree that maybe we're muddy on things. We're not always sure. Things are debatable. But if it's God speaking, it's true. So what is God's teaching on it? This video is for a Christian audience, not an atheist audience so much, even though you're welcome to watch. But some of this might frustrate atheists because I'm assuming that God exists and the Bible is true. Should? No. No one really should. I don't think it's anything to get worked up over, though. This is one that I think really reflects the Christian sentiment. It's that Christians don't believe we should cuss, but they do it anyway, and it's not really a big deal. To which my response is God creates everything, and he creates everything either good or bad. There is no gray area. God isn't ambiguous. He doesn't go, no. And so when he created language good. He created our mouths, our tongues, good. Our ability to speak is a good thing. And with every good thing God has given us, we have the ability to misuse it and use it for evil. And so that's exactly what I think of in terms of cussing. If there is a form of bad speech, we should abstain from it. And it's actually something to get worked up over, not in the sense that I'm going to hyperventilate and seize up and die, but it should be just as talked about as any other issue. Because using our language improperly is not something we should do in 100% of cases. I really enjoyed this comment, and I'm thankful to this commenter for kind of opening up a little bit and sharing his story. I just prefer not to cuss because of personal views. I can communicate without it. There's been times when I've used profanity that I'm not too proud of, mostly out of anger, which is why I try not to get angry. I'll admit it's hard, but not all anger is sinful. Christians cussing all the time puts me off. I'm not sure about the biblical data for not cussing, but I don't think it's a salvation issue. It may just be a personal conviction issue. It may be a real struggle for some, So sometimes we should extend grace instead of running to condemn. What an amazing comment. And I'm really grateful that this guy commented, and I'm going to expand on some things, not to make him look dumb, but because I think there's some more things to add on to this idea. His final thought absolutely agreed with. We should extend grace, but as a Lutheran Christian, and this channel sometimes talks about Lutheranism, is that we believe in the equal importance of law and gospel. And so law is important because if we don't have law, we don't know why we're sinful. If we don't have a standard, we're not sure why we broke it. So we need to know the standard, and we need to know when we've been wrong, because how else would we know? And then the grace is equally important because the grace comes only from God, and it's how we're saved. So yes, grace is absolutely important, but it's not to dismiss the idea that we need law to know that we've done wrong. The second part is, I don't think it's a salvation issue. Interesting idea. Isn't a salvation issue. So what is a salvation issue? And this is kind of a debate I get into a lot with Christians, is what constitutes you being a Christian? At what point have you crossed the threshold of being correct theologically enough to go to heaven? And so a lot of Christians believe that a baby, especially if a baby's been baptized, goes to heaven, even though this baby is a complete idiot and has no concept of God, or of theology, or of the Holy Trinity, or of the Eucharist, or of the Old Testament, or of law and gospel, but they go to heaven anyway, because salvation is not a matter of the head. Which is why I get into kind of a debate with Christians who make theological triage. These are the issues that you have to believe to be Christian. So man cannot make this standard of what counts in order to get them into heaven, because it doesn't work that way. God saves us. If it's any amount of our head knowledge, it's never going to work. The smartest theologian wouldn't get into heaven, the same as the baby. So is cussing a salvation issue? Well, I would say yes, because every issue is a salvation issue. To be perfectly right with God would be to have perfect theology and to be perfectly sinless. And even once you've done that, just because you're perfect doesn't mean you're supposed to go to heaven. God can do whatever he wants. But I just push back on the idea that there's a such thing as not a salvation issue. Everything is a salvation issue, which is why we can never do it, which is why we need grace, so God can save us. And then this guy kind of nailed it on the head. These are the scriptures I would have brought in at the end of the video anyway. He quotes Ephesians 4:29. Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. I have a really interesting relationship with this Bible verse because I read the entire Bible cover to cover a few years ago looking for answers to questions. But then I got answers to questions that I didn't ask, and I came away asking questions that I wasn't expecting to once I finished the Bible. This was a question that I didn't ask going to the Bible. I had no idea that the Bible would tell me whether or not I should cuss. I thought that was kind of a modern idea. But there's a reason that Paul in Ephesians writes, do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouth. He doesn't say never cuss. Because unwholesome talk can encompass a whole lot of words, which is where I come up short. I use unwholesome talk without cussing a lot. That's something I need to work on. But then when we look at cuss words, another term for cuss word is just bad word. And so why should we use bad language? If these words in our society are connotated with foulness, and we don't say them around young kids for whatever reason, then there's probably a reason. We shouldn't cuss then. It is kind of a salvation issue, and we shouldn't cuss along with not using bad language of any other variety, be it a cuss word or not. Should Christians drink alcohol? 72% voted yes and 28% did no. I was also surprised by this. You guys always surprise me with the poll results. I was expecting maybe less people saying no, you shouldn't drink. And I think that's probably just because the question is worded pretty broadly. Should Christians drink alcohol? And so these comments are going to really walk you through the journey of how to answer that question as a Christian. I mean, you have to for the Eucharist. So the answer is resounding yes. Sorry, Baptists. I wonder if this guy is a high church Protestant or a Catholic. Because if he's a Catholic, he believes in transubstantiation, which means the Eucharist changes. Transubstantiation, change, substance, ation, the process of doing something. It becomes the literal body and blood of Christ and is no longer bread and wine. So technically, if you're Catholic, you don't believe the Eucharist is consuming wine. But if you're a high church Protestant, you believe that Christ is in with, or if you're a Lutheran, you believe that Christ is present with the bread and wine. If you're a Presbyterian, you believe that God is spiritually present in the Eucharist, blah, 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 blah. But he makes a good point. We do consume wine in the Eucharist. So what do we make of that? And also, Jesus turned water into wine at a party. And then they drink wine at the Passover. So it doesn't seem like our answer should be, no, you can't drink alcohol. That's not the sense we get so far. I think can Christians drink alcohol is a better way to word it. Should implies that it's the right thing to do, while can just means there is no harm in it. But again, God created a universe with objective morality. Should and should not is always going to exist, but it's not always going to be easy for us to find. So if God made alcohol and he made it good, then we should partake in it. But we should not abuse it, because man has every free will to do evil. Especially as a Lutheran, we believe that man's free will is only to do evil. So we can easily abuse alcohol. I don't need to tell any of you how alcohol can be abused, because it easily can. The Bible is clear. Drinking alcohol is fine, but don't get drunk. Yep, and then this guy again just brings in the scripture that I would have brought in anyway to kind of conclude this section of the video. Yeah, drinking is fine because God made it and God made everything good. Getting drunk, abusing it, is not good. Should Christians wait to have sex until marriage? 96% voted yes, we should wait. 4% voted no, we shouldn't. I was also not expecting such a resounding yes from the audience. We should wait to have sex for marriage, because a lot of us are not doing that. Which is interesting, and it kind of goes back to my comment about Mormonism earlier, is that Christians, we have a standard. We're just not as good at living up to our own standard as the Mormons are. And then this question is also interesting, because this was one question I did seek an answer for when I read the Bible. I was reading the Bible cover to cover, kind of looking for where God establishes kind of like a sacrament, like he establishes baptism or the Eucharist, where he says, baptize in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And so now we have kind of a written idea of how to do it, or the Eucharist. This is my body and blood given for you for the forgiveness of sins. Okay, do this in remembrance of me. Okay, he's given us an instruction and the broad outline of how to do it. With marriage, it's not so. The first marriage is Adam and Eve. And so Adam is chilling and he's like, bruh, I'm just chilling. And God's like, bruh, you need a girlfriend, dog. And so he makes Eve, and I shouldn't say girlfriend because it wasn't a girlfriend in our modern sense. And it wasn't even really described as a marriage in Genesis. God just gives Adam a woman. And so throughout the scripture, there's no really clear way other than just man and woman coming together. That's marriage. And that's why in the modern context, we have this idea of consummating a marriage. Like the ceremony is not that much, but when you get home and you have sex, that's when it's consummated. It's like becomes legit. And so that's more of the sense we get from Scripture, is that the marriage act, having sex, is what makes you man and wife. And thus is why it's sinful to have sex with more than one person, because God didn't make us to be polygamists. Not that there weren't plenty in the Bible, and not that God doesn't love the polygamists and love those who have had sex with multiple people. But the best argument I can give scripturally for why we should be monogamous is that God gives Adam one woman, not two. One of my biggest regrets is that I didn't wait, but I wouldn't be the person I am without the mistakes I made. This is just such a wise comment to end the video on, but I'm really glad that this guy was vulnerable and opened up about the fact that he didn't wait, and so that he regrets that. And that's very vulnerable, but it's also a really important part to receiving God's grace, is we know that there's a law and we know that we've broken it, and now God's going to forgive us. And isn't that amazing? I wouldn't be the person I am without the mistakes I made. This part I could not agree more with. When we've made mistakes in life, or we could even use the word sin, when we've sinned in life, we have one of two options with how to approach that. We can be angry at ourselves forever and we can just wallow in misery, or we can hope that God's going to forgive us, and he will, and then learn from our mistakes. Two options. Learn from it or don't. And you might as well learn from it. By the way, just launched my first Theology with Josh merch. Go pick up your own Ask Me About My Best Friend hoodie today. It's got embroidered cross and Bible on the sleeves. I really wanted to make something that's not crap, because I think most YouTuber merch is just crap, like basically pinned on a piece of paper to a t-shirt that washes off instantly, and so embroidered stuff seems like way better to me. And the mission of the merch is actually to help spread the word and to help get conversations started about Jesus and not talk about my YouTube channel. My margin for the hoodies is like $12 before taxes. Any money that I make from the sale of the hoodies is just going to go to be reinvested in the channel so we can make more videos talking about Jesus. Or if I make way too much money from the hoodies, which is doubtful, I'm just going to just give the money away. I'm not going to use any of the money from the merch to profit for myself. Thank you guys for watching. Remember, Jesus is with you wherever you go to the end of the age, and I'll see you in the next video.